One. Welcome everybody to the latest episode of the Two Fish at the Table Poker Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Legend Ben One on PokerStars.
And I'm your other host, East Coast Sam on PokerStars.
Sam, we had watched Futurama for a previous podcast episode, and I was watching it again, and it was an episode where the entire cast receives a Sam $100 bill.
Sam $100 bill.
So, guys, we are here to discuss the second batch of episodes for the Big Game on Tour, the revival / third season of the Big Game that puts one loose cannon at the table against 5 poker pros and sees if they can turn a profit in 150 hands. Again, we are pretty big fans of the original iteration of the show. Not, depending on the table, some of them are a bit more hit and miss, but and then we talked about the first batch with Nikki Limo as loose cannon a while back. And so having now hadn't seen those episodes before, I came in with a slightly different set of expectations and hopes for the second batch. And so I think I had more reasonable expectations. Therefore, I more or less got what I was expecting with episodes 6 through 10.
Yeah, I mean, we thought that season one was fine. I mean, it had its problems, namely in how much time it spent recapping hands, having players talk about things that weren't
Just to
super
clarify, season
necessary.
1, you mean part 1 of season 3?
Right, yeah. Season one of the revival, basically. Um, yeah, I mean, it had potential. It just needed to focus more on the poker action, have more sort of exciting dialogue. I thought the production value was also very good in season one. I really liked the setup. The table looked really nice. I liked sort of the nighttime sort of backdrop. They also brought back a previous loose cannon to act as a coach, which I saw a lot of people in the comments didn't really like. I thought it was pretty fine. I liked that it established continuity with the previous incarnation of the show. She's also just a good presence. She's not hamming it up for the camera. She's not being too distracting. She's very concise with her critiques to the loose cannon. So yeah, I mean, for this time around, my expectations were, not super high, not super low, just sort of toward the middle. I wanted to see good poker action. I wanted to see some fun table banter, and then again, some good production design.
Yeah, and so the choice of the loose cannon, and again, it seems like it's almost kind of a loose definition of loose cannon. This being the Lily Newhouse, who we actually know from the 2015 main event. She was one of the sort of outer table spotlighted women that was pretty regularly featured in those like sort of day 4 episodes. And
Mhm.
so and it's not that I have a problem with a loose cannon being a player we've seen before in some capacity. I mean, she has on her head about $109,000 in her poker earnings, a lot of which has come in the last couple of years. And
Right.
her main event finish, she finished 138th, so that was about 47,000. So almost half of her tournament earnings were from that main event run. And so it's kind of funny. At one point, she's saying, "This is the biggest opportunity of my life." When I kind of disagree. I kind of feel like if you make it to the final 140 players in the main event, that's, I think, bigger than this level of stakes. Had this been, add an extra digit to the blinds and the buy-in, maybe I'd argue, okay, fine, that's the biggest spot. But with the 100, 200 with 50K, I think the main event spot was a bigger moment for her as a poker player.
Yeah, I mean, she cashed 6 times in WSOP, all online events last year. She also cashed 3 times before in the WSOP circuit, including getting third place in one event, and sixth place in another event. So, she's had plenty of opportunities to have big wins and successes. She's obviously a, pretty good player, especially over the last couple of years. She's definitely seems to have sharpened her game. So, yeah, I mean, big opportunity. I don't really know. Loose cannon, Nikki Limo definitely seemed to be less experienced than she was. Um, I'm okay with a player that's had, again, like a few tournament cashes, maybe a deep run in a big event. But yeah, I mean, it's a little different than, what the intent of the show is. Somebody like Ernest Wiggins, who really just felt like a guy walking in off the street to play poker and was playing it up with some of the biggest names in the game. Like, I think the show needs to return to that a bit better.
Yeah, like even with Face the Ace, as much as we hated that show, I did feel like those players in that program did kind of embody what I would assume a loose cannon would be. Kind of your average Joe, average Jane, who maybe has played a few $25 online tournaments here and there. Maybe they've won, maybe they've lost. They've played poker for on and off recreationally for their some of their adult life. And so again with Newhouse, again it's hard to get a sense of what exactly is in her life besides poker. We meet her boyfriend. We learn a bit about her over the course of the 5 episodes with a few interviews here and there. I think maybe we learn maybe a little bit less about her than we did with Nikki Limo. Although to be
Mhm.
fair, part of that is because the introductory segment of her first episode was a little bit shorter than the equivalent for Nikki Limo. That was also tying into the whole the big game is back and all that. So that might have been a part of that. And again, I was rooting for his loose cannon, even if it was just more of a six ranger than maybe a loose cannon. Given that she didn't feel like an amateur at the table, she just felt like she was not one of the top pros at the table.
Yeah, I mean, obviously she's featured in a lot of the coverage. A lot of the players are talking about her at the table, and kind of like the previous season with Nikki Lima. There's this sort of how do you want to describe, like, sort of like they want her to win, but they also don't want her to win, simultaneously. So it's an interesting dynamic to have this sort of, they didn't quite soft play her as much as Nikki Lima was soft played last time, but
Well,
you know,
the yes and no. Grobsky maybe not soft play, but maybe just kind of like polarized, like fancy play syndrome because it's against a loose cannon. I don't know. As far as the episodes that were released, these came out about a little over a month ago to begin with, and then they a couple of weeks was kind of the release strategy. Viewership pretty good. I think a little bit of a dip over the course of the 5 episodes, but they be multiple hundreds of thousands of views. They've been out for less time than the first batch, so maybe it's a little bit less in the viewership, but I think more than Game of Gold had. So it definitely seems like, as far as from a YouTube video standpoint, these were successful videos, and I think even the comments were maybe a little bit kinder. I didn't read each one of every video, but I think they were a little bit kinder to the ratio of action to the non-action, even though I think there's maybe some truth to those critiques still with these latest episodes. But I felt that maybe the balance was ever so slightly better, but just not quite where I want it to be as far as the total number of hands shown, the number of bits, post-mortems, and all that. I think that still could be improved, but at the same time, there's always the fast forward button if you really are inclined to skip those moments.
yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it definitely felt a little bit better than the last rung, but there still needs to be a lot of editing, to be blunt. I mean, I don't have a problem with players talking about a hand that was really consequential, but pretty much every single hand that's shown and the commentary isn't that sophisticated. It's like, whoa, I can't believe he had that hand. Yeah, I played it like this. I play it so crazy. It's just not super interesting. I mean, when I was taking notes on the main event, we were doing our main event runs, pretty much every single episode, I had a full page of notes. This time around, I mean, I have like two-thirds, maybe half a page of notes for each episode, just because you're skipping through so much of recaps, and also the introductions were very long. There's sort of conclusion to each episode where Joe Stapleton comes out and just kind of like, whoa, that was a crazy bunch of hands, wasn't it? You know, all told, I mean, that's, the introduction and conclusion by themselves, that's about 5 minutes that could be cut out of the show right there. I don't, necessarily mind like little animated, welcome to the big game little section they have with the camera moving through Las Vegas. Like, that's okay, but you just don't need to have these long introductions. You don't really need to have like fancy graphics showing how many, chips, how much money players are up by. You can just sort of show that quickly at the beginning with a quick little table.
Also, something right there. Were you not surprised that when they showed the stack size and the amount of up and minus, it's usually flipped. Like
Yeah.
normally you have the stack size on the left and then the differential on the right. This time they had it reversed.
Yeah, it was a little weird.
I'm still seeing it. It took me a second to sort of like realize, wait a minute, that's not how I normally see it. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like, there's, just show us a table at the beginning, and have Joe Stapleton say, Maria Ho's up by 60,000, Phil Locke's down by 60,000, and just move right into the action. Yeah, I mean, there's just little things they can do to tighten it up. And they've heard all this criticism. I mean, there was a sea of criticism last time in pretty much every single episode about this. So I hope this is a step in the right direction. In the next batch of episodes, they'll to keep tightening this down.
Also, only amplifying the post-mortems being kind of lame is that oftentimes there's almost kind of like a fake commercial break, and then Chris Hardigan like recaps that same hand again. So
Right.
we get sort of two sort of recaps of a hand when it just happened, and it's again it's so quick and insubstantial that it really kind of irked me each time it happened. For the most part, these episodes have between like 10 to 12 hands, and there's
Yep.
usually one or two that are usually pretty quick. And so it definitely felt like, there just wasn't quite enough, kind of fun poker action. Like I feel like if you had, again, 4 solid episodes in here instead of 5 sort of maybe fillerized, dragged out episodes to really have a balance. But then the problem is that they'd have this whole, 30 hand per episode sort of scheme here when I really wish they'd be a bit more flexible with that sort of production.
Yeah.
But beyond just the actual programming itself, let's also discuss who was actually at the table with Lily Newhouse. And this round, nobody actually leaves the game. The six players that begin this table are staying the entire way through. Whereas last time we had, Griffin Bencher for all of like two hands at the very end, which was kind of awkward once Nicky Mo busted. In this case, the five non-loose cans stick around, whether they're up or down, they hold to it. So we have kind of three, players that we've seen, before a fair amount, maybe two a bit more than the third, and then two kind of wild cards here. So we have Maria Ho, who we have gotten to know very well through Game of Gold, her multiple main event deep runs, and just very common active presence in the poker world. Phil Locke, who has been a little bit on the bit on the back burner recently, with maybe a recent reemergence in some of the recent Pokergo programming, and then Sam Grafton, who I don't know a super ton about, but I remember he was at the future table in the 2017 main event. He pops up there here and there in the commentary booth every now and then. So I knew him enough. Maybe the average poker viewer wouldn't know him too well, but I knew him pretty well. And then the wild cards here, we have Michael Ian Black, an actor comedian who I haven't actually seen him in anything. He had a show on Comedy Central a while back called like Michael and Michael Have Issues. And it's just kind of
Yeah.
one of those like comedian-led comedy shows, half hour, a lot of skit segment type bits. I saw a few ads here and there, but never actually saw him in that show. And then the real loose cannon, if you ask me, Mr. Dave Krosky, who, if you ask me, is kind of I can't say MVP, but he's definitely kind of the main spotlighted main character of sorts in this entire run of episodes.
Yeah, I mean, Krosky is really sort of like the table captain. Like he just put his table captain hat on, and was like, I'm going to just run the show and be the funny guy, which is interesting because Phil Locke is usually that guy. Like usually Phil Locke just kind of takes control of a table and does that. And kind of disappointingly, like Locke really did not get much going throughout the entire show, finished down by quite a lot, and really just didn't say much and didn't really do a lot. I wonder if that's because he just kind of saw that Dave Krosky was going crazy and just sort of wanted to let him take over. Um, which, I was kind of disappointed because I really like Phil Locke's banter and I like his table presence. Maybe we need to have Antonio Esfandiari with them so that, they really sort of clash and generate stuff. Yeah, Maria Ho's a very solid, obviously very solid player, also very solid table presence. She doesn't ham up for the camera too much. She offers some nice commentary, nice feedback, but doesn't, again, get in too much way. And then Sam Grafton is sort of interesting because of his relationship with Dave Krosky. It was almost kind of like, it reminded me a lot of almost Curtis Reistad and Kyle
Mhm.
Kerrigan, where it's just like
But
Curtis
more
Reistad just,
friendly.
yeah, just targets Kerrigan and just has all this sort of banter and interaction with them. Yeah, I mean, the relationship between Krosky and Grafton is a lot friendlier. Grafton gives as much as he takes. There's no meanness there or anything, but it really just like so many situations where they just come at each other and there's this sort of playful banter. And then Michael Ian Black also really interesting because he just seems to genuinely get tilted by Dave Krosky. Like there's multiple occasions where he seems genuinely like not hamming it up, not making humor or anything, like ticked off at Krosky and what he's saying and what he's doing, which to me was the funniest thing of the whole coverage. Like I was just laughing when he was just like frustrated and like rolling his eyes and all that. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell with any actor, especially a comedian. It can be kind of hard to sort of piece out what is real and what's not real. And I definitely felt it lean more towards the real than the hamming it up in
Yeah.
a very like subtle comedic way. Each player, I do think more or less had kind of a through line of they were up, then they were down, then they were angry, then they were losing to this player and whatnot. For the most part, each player had that, with the exception of Locke, because once he kind of lost that big hand to Maria early on, he really just kind of stayed in the red and didn't really play too many hands after that, which is kind of strange given his style.
Mhm.
Maria Ho, kind of the opposite. She was maybe down a bit early and then kind of won, was a fairly steady winner from the rest of the table onward. Newhouse had a little bit of a, I think more enjoyable narrative than Nikki Limo had, trying to,
Yep.
facing an early deficit, working her way back up, hitting another speed bump, and then ending on a high note. Ian Black, again, he was up pretty much the whole day. Maybe got up stuck a little bit, and then had a late sort of ending where he won a few more chips off of Dave Grofsky. So that worked out for him. And Grafton again was kind of up and down, but I think he ended I think in the green ultimately as
Mhm.
well. So each player had a fair amount of up and down, which is good because it's it just makes it more rewarding when you're watching 5 episodes to see things progress rather than just sort of stay the course all the way through. As far as everyone's play overall, I mean, we're going to get into each episode in a minute here, but I wasn't, besides Grofsky's just kind of awful play, nobody's play really surprised me too much. I figured Ian Black would be kind of tight, but would maybe call down Dave a few times here and there. With the loose cannons, it's kind of funny. Like no matter how experienced or inexperienced these loose cannons are, it's kind of odd how their play always kind of is relative. Besides maybe the lower quality player loose cannons, they all kind of play kind of ABC-ish poker when they're sort of hovering, within like 80% of the starting stack or up or above. It's kind of funny. I mean, I don't blame them because like I turn a profit, but it did feel like with these stakes here that there was less room for them to sort of do have more tools in their arsenal at first, at least.
Yeah, I mean, Newhouse played pretty solid by the numbers poker. Obviously, she got into a bit of a hole at the beginning, but she did manage to claw her way out, which was nice. It was a good sort of narrative boost. But yeah, I mean, there were no hands that I really saw would like really grab my attention in terms of, oh wow, that was an awesome bluff, or oh wow, that was a great hero call. I mean, Krosky by far was the loosest player. I mean, really just playing any two, making a lot of really strange calls, a lot of really strange raises, which is, I mean, it makes for some entertaining value, but you just have to wonder, like, what is going through his mind? Is he just doing this to be entertaining? Is he doing this because he genuinely thinks he's ahead, or, he has a remote draw, backdoors, or whatever? I just don't understand a consistent style of play there. And again, these hand recaps could open that up a little bit and we could see a little bit more of his mindset, but it really just boils down to like, yeah, I'm playing crazy, woo, and that's disappointing.
I mean, so I think just getting into episode one here, we have a brief little introduction with Lily's audition being shown, her being selected. She talks about her background briefly. Again, a little bit shorter of a segment than the equivalent for Nikki Lima, which is fine given that we're now in the middle or maybe the middle, I don't know, of this revival season. The table talk I thought was pretty good at first. I was enjoying the energy. Phil Locke was a bit more talkative in the early goings than he was later, for example. And I think Newhouse hadn't quite gotten to that deficit, so you're a bit more liable to maybe be a bit more upbeat and whatnot with the table. With this first episode, though, it felt like it just kind of was a very standard embodiment of all the pros and cons of the first batch of episode. It was not a terrible thing or not a great thing. It's fine. But I did feel that after they had a couple early post-mortems in this episode, they dialed it back afterwards. That was fortunate. And there was some, pretty good action here. Phil Locke and Maria Ho squaring off Sam Grafton, coolering Lily early on. So she was down to 14.2 thousand chips after the third hand, which again, that still leaves you 147 hands afterwards. But it's really hard to, when you're down to 1/3 or, in this case, less of your starting stack to really get your head back in the game. So, the action was actually pretty good, I thought, in the early goings. And it did give us some hope for Newhouse at the very when she does win the last episode to end on a higher note.
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple fun hands. There's, a set over set situation between Michael Ian Black and Maria Ho. Some fun banter at first. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, at first, it definitely seemed like everybody was, energetic, happy to be there. And then maybe it was just because it was a long session. Maybe it's because, Phil Locke didn't get much going that he, talked less and less. And so did Newhouse. I mean, she was also just kind of card dead for a couple episodes. But at least in the first episode, there's a little bit more with her, a little bit more sort of her talking. So.
Yeah, and then so there were 12 hands shown in episode one, and so I was hoping maybe now that the introduction's out of the way, maybe we'd have a faster pace. Episode two or episode seven in this case actually was even slower, with only 10 hands shown, and the action doesn't even begin until over 5 minutes into this. These episodes are like 47-ish minutes long, and they're less if you subtract the recap introduction and subtract the credit Stapleton coming in, that only leaves you maybe like 40 minutes. And so again, I was a little bit let down, and with the exception of the fact that we had a pretty crazy back-to-back hands involving Grafton and Krosky, where Krosky actually makes a 3x pot bet on the flop after Grafton had flopped the set. And then he still manages to river a straight to win the hand. And then he actually checks the nuts back on the river, like this guy, and I mean, that was, as far as idiot players doing dumb things, that was pretty entertaining, that entire hand.
Yeah, I mean, checking back the nuts. I mean, that's I don't even know what to say about that. I mean, at the WSOP, I mean, you usually get a penalty because it's considered collusion. Uh, I'm not saying it was collusion here. I'm just saying like that is just such a strange move. I don't understand what he was thinking there.
And then the very next hand, Grafton flops a set. Krosky turns it straight. Money goes in. They run it twice for some reason, and Krosky wins another big hand. And so at this point, he's kind of at his peak profitability that he will never reclaim as the action continues. And again, that was a pretty crazy two-act sort of two-hand structure. So I didn't mind that we had a post-mortem on those two hands because those were such wild hands. I just would have liked a bit more insight into those hands. But nonetheless, that was again probably I think there's maybe one other segment in a later episode. Those are probably again poker action wise maybe the peak of this Lily Newhouse collection.
Yeah, absolutely.
But otherwise, it's I mean it can be pretty entertaining to see a bad player play poorly. I mean, one of the things he would do was he'd bet 300, which is like 1.5 big blinds in this structure. And again, it's weird because for the most part it works in the sense that no one raises him or it gets him to a cheap showdown. So it's kind of funny how that worked. I felt like if this wasn't on TV, that would not have worked in real life. But maybe that's the one little Krovsky-ism that kind of worked for his favor, is even though it's a pretty silly move.
Well, there's also the Kroskyism of wanting to run it like 4 times or 20 times or 16 times, which comes up multiple times in this episode. It eventually has a sort of brick joke sort of payoff in the last episode, which I liked. I don't really running it multiple times. I mean, it's just not something I would really ever want to do. I've never played cash games professionally, so I don't quite know what the logic is, but just 20 times, 4 times, just dude, no. Just for the novelty of it, it's not enough. No, don't do it.
I mean, half the time he said that he would sit on the river with there's no more cards to run out, so it wouldn't even matter. But it's kind of funny troll logic, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And I mean, by the episode's end, Newhouse has battled back from her once 14,000 up to about 33,000. So again, at the 2/5 mark, that's still pretty good. One thing I was surprised by was the number of times that they don't actually show what the hand count was in the corner
Right.
of the screen. Now, sometimes I could assume it might have been the next hand chronologically. Other times I kind of had to parse and quite try to figure it out. And I was trying to figure out what would be the reason why they wouldn't show that. And it makes me wonder if the only reason would be that they showed certain hands out of order. That's the only thing I could think of as to why they would do that.
Yeah, I mean that's often the case with reality television shows, or they'll splice in a reaction that doesn't actually apply to that hand, and they'll move it so that it makes it seem like that hand was bigger than it actually was. Um, you know, I don't necessarily mind that it's being shown out of order. You have to make an entertaining show. You have to also build a narrative here, right? Lily Newhouse was down, and then she makes this big comeback. Phil Locke is down. He reloads in this episode for no real reason. You have to sort of tell these stories, and sometimes you have to do that out of order. So I don't necessarily mind that they did that.
And then, yeah, I mean, it's just something that just I was wondering
Yeah,
in the back of my mind. Not that it mattered much in the sense. Episode 8, called "Dave Can't Buy a Hand," has basically two themes here. One is Lily winning a bit more, even though she does get cooler again at one point, and then Dave just giving all the money he won back for some reason. And at one point, Dave actually calls a Phil Locke 4x overbet on the river with one pair, and I was like, dude, just even if you think you're right, you can just fold. It's not worth the amount of money you have already invested. And there was again the pacing in this episode was again um pretty meh. I mean, it was pretty slow. Only 10 hands were shown again once again this episode, and a couple of them are pretty quick Lily wins. So there was really only maybe like 6 or 7 substantial-ish hands in this entire episode. One thing I was caught off guard by was the interview of Newhouse discussing her breast cancer diagnosis from a while back. That was something that caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting to hear about that. So I obviously sympathize for that. And there was kind of two major character beats about Lily Newhouse that I was taken aback by. One being the breast cancer one, and the next one being what her plan was to do with her supposed winnings. Like she wants to buy a pool. And that's I think revealed in episode 9. And I kind of thought to myself, I don't know if that's very like a motivating factor for me as an audience member to root for her. I mean, I'm fine with her winning, but I just felt like that's not. I don't know. You kind of want like a more heartwarming purchase with your winnings in a pool for your house.
Yeah, and also, I mean, a swimming pool is just terrible to buy. You have to winterize it, you have to take care of it, you have to have all these chemicals. I mean, it increases the value of your home, but I mean, what she earned like what, $56,000? I mean, a lot of that money is going away into the pool and you're not going to get back. So all right. I mean, whatever she wants. I mean, definitely the breast cancer stuff was nice to it was nice to see that in terms of
But
her having it, but in terms of building her story and letting us know more about her, I really liked that. We don't really have segments in terms of the other people talking about their backstory and what they're bringing to the table and what's going through their lives currently. We learned a little bit about Krosky that he sells office furniture. It's like the
yeah.
office furniture king of Vegas or whatever. I mean, that was kind of nice, but it would be nice if you're going to have these segments, let us learn a little bit about the players and who they are and what they're bringing to the table and what they've been through over the last year, something like that. With Maria Ho, who's obviously out and about in the public sphere in poker, maybe she talks a little bit about how her poker game's been the last few months. Did she do any training for this? Something like that that gives us a little bit more to their personalities and characters rather than just, whoa, that was a crazy hand.
And this episode also had an example of I kind of call non-coaching coaching from Nadia,
Yeah.
where she kind of doesn't really give her, at least not on camera that we watch, any like substantially good advice, which is again, there's only so much you can do as a sideline coach. I'm not saying that she could be like, Scott Seaver analysis and like what you should do in this spot there, but I just kind of feel like, oh, it's just like, just play tight, play your cards. Like it just I don't know. If you're gonna make a big deal about her being her coach, then she needed to be a bit more on the ball than just, vague generalities like that.
Yeah, I mean that's sometimes that's okay to basically just tell somebody, keep doing what you're doing, just keep your head in the game, stay focused. So I mean, I was okay with that. It's not like she, I don't know, was standing off to the sideline with the tablet computer that had solvers on it or anything, like somebody I know.
Oh, look at
It's again like it's not supposed to be super distracting. I mean, obviously, it seems to be like in between hands. It's not quite clear. Like I think Lily just kind of gets up from the table and walks over while the cards are being shuffled. So it's okay if it's just something quick. I don't really mind that.
And usually these, coaching moments were during the session intermission. So that was like after
Yeah.
30-ish hands, the episode break parts. And her boyfriend's also in the stands or not, in the area watching. So that's kind of her rail is those two. And we're not actually there's no indication of if this was filmed before or after Nikki Limo's time.
Yeah.
Obviously they treat it in the edit as if it was after, even though technically we have no idea. Maybe it was filmed after. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
But I'm sure somebody could analyze certain things and find little clues or hints there. But we'll never know. But otherwise, with this episode again, I thought for me it was the weakest one of the first of the batch so far. This episode, just because of its pacing and it's just kind of the same little irking factors that I don't like about the show as much as it could be. But nonetheless, with Lily, still trying to fight back, I was still engaged and hoping that she could turn a profit in the end at this point.
Absolutely.
With episode 9, we have maybe the most clickbait and false title of all of them. So many monster hands. Like I'm sorry, Sam, was there a single monster hand in this episode? I don't think there was.
Black had aces at one point. Ho had aces at one point. Like pre-flop, they had hands, but like it wasn't like ace
Oh,
high
okay.
flush.
Well, I guess if you mean monster hands, like starting hands, okay.
Yeah, starting hands.
I
Yeah.
was thinking more as like big momentous like clashings or bluffs or I don't know something like that.
No,
Maybe
there
some,
was there was quite a few premium starting hands here. Black had queens.
yeah.
Also had jacks. There were a few.
We get 11 hands in this episode, and again, to my surprise, I found this to be again just kind of the weakest of the batch. I mean, I was at this point kind of getting numb to the whole Krovsky like shtick. I mean, it was getting kind of old. It was kind of repetitive, and he was losing, but he wasn't losing like bang after bang. He was just losing like chunk after chunk. It wasn't like this epic collapse in poker history. It's just kind of like a few thousand here, a few thousand there. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary. And again, Lily again fighting back gets up to about 44,500 by this episode's end, which means she really only needs to win like one medium to big pot in the last episode to really make a profit. So that's I know that was promising for her, but at this point, kind of the players in the green and the players in the red was kind of staying the same episode to episode. So you weren't seeing like Maria Ho getting stacked by Phil Locke and then Locke getting stacked by Grafton right afterwards. You weren't seeing that sort of action. It was just wasn't that kind of table really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned that Krosky kind of was getting on your nerves because at this point he really had sort of gotten on my nerves. I mean, he seems like a nice guy. I appreciate that he tried to be entertaining, and I'd rather that somebody try to be entertaining at a poker player and not quite get there than not try to be entertaining at all, and it's just super boring. But yeah, like I didn't really find him that funny. I didn't find him that charismatic. I appreciate that Grafton kind of like rolled with his shtick a little bit and had a little sort of back and forth. But again, nothing that was super funny, or like there's no standout lines, there's no standout moments that I thought were super funny, beside again Black just getting ticked off at Krosky doing all this.
And I
Um,
really kind of feel like it's around this point where Maria Ho and Locke they just faded more and more into the background. Like Ho, I
yeah.
think played a bit more hands. Like she gets bluffed by Grafton in the last episode of this hand, in the last hand of this episode. And again, so she's not like folding her way to hand number 150, but it just kind of felt like it became just more the Krofsky Grafton show with a little bit of Lily mixed in there, winning a few thousand off of Grofsky usually. And again, it just made this episode feel kind of generic in a sense, even though it's hard to say that about unpredictable cash game poker television show like this. And so I was, it was trending down for me. I wasn't, annoyed or bored or insulted by the show or anything. It was dipping in my interest as after episodes kept kind of lowering the bar for which one was the worst of the batch. Well,
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you have six players that are sort of highlighted at a table, not all of them are going to get an even spread in the edit. Some of them are going to have a little bit more moments than others, but there should be, I think, close to an even distribution, especially when Maria Ho and Phil Locke are just such great table presence and have such screen presence. Maybe this was just an off night for them and they just didn't have a whole lot of things to say. They didn't have a whole lot of hands that they could make super entertaining. But I would have liked a little bit more from both of them in the edit. They're obviously cutting out, they're not showing every single hand. What were some of the other hands that you didn't show? Did they win those? I mean, that would have been nice to just have just to show them winning a little bit. Things like that could go a long way.
And then that brings us to episode 10 entitled Make or Break for the Loose Cannon. And so with again the episode begins with hand number 124, so that's again about 1/6 of the total hands played. And we have I didn't mention this, but we usually frown upon ads in the middle of our poker programming, and there were these ads for like auditioning for the big game on tour, like intermixed in these episodes, and they're not super long, but I was just surprised because they don't even really say how to audition or what the audition process means or anything because you'd think that these are all kind of probably already produced.
Right.
So again, they're assuming there'll be season 4, which I guess there probably will be. I don't know. I mean, it's a fairly low budget show besides the 50K that they have to stake for the loose cannon, I suppose, and whatnot. But again, it irks me that when these are on YouTube, there's already ads on YouTube, and if these were on like TV, there'd be commercial breaks. So it's like it just always bugs me. It'll always be a negative point for me.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of odd to have commercials for a show you've already shot. And again, to not explain what the audition process is, usually if there's some sort of show that has a contest, they'll explain like you need to call this phone number, you need to write a letter or something. But it's like I'm assuming the audition process was something like you play like a poker tournament and then you do an audition or something. I'm not quite like, does the person who win the tournament automatically get a spot on the show, or do you do auditions before the tournament so that like you have entertaining people? Because like, what if somebody wins the tournament and they're totally boring? Like I
Yeah.
imagine they want to have entertaining people. Like it's not quite clear. Like also like during the audition, like they just ask her questions about things. There needs to be a little bit more transparency here if you're going to do something like that. Yeah, just cut that out. I mean, if you want to have like a separate video, Maria Ho presents like, here's how you audition or something, you can do that. But just having it in the middle of an episode in which you already have a lot of basically filler, yeah, just cut that out.
Or include it at the end of episode 5, have
Yeah,
the audition, ad thing during the credits. I think that's totally appropriate. If you want to win like Willie Newhouse, then do A, B, and C. I think that would have been fair by my count, instead of having a little bit of an ad in every single episode, even when it's not very well explained.
right.
And then so episode 5 at least kind of gives us some, solid conclusion of things where Lily finally gets some positive direction here. She wins the third hand of the episode. It was a pretty amusing hand where Krofsky says, if you can predict what I'm about to do I'll give you $1,000. And so they write down on some paper on the net roll that was alluded to earlier. And Lily actually wins the hand, and Krofsky has to pay $1,000. So it was pretty funny. And I would have probably guessed the same thing, bet 300. That was kind of his shtick for that table. So that would have been an extra $1,000 for me. I've been playing. And then the very next hand shown, we finally get a substantial win for the loose cannon. And what I have to say is probably maybe the biggest loose cannon comeback in big game history as far as
Mhm.
chip stack decline to ultimate final result. I think that's probably is the best.
Yeah, I think so too. I'd have to look at the numbers, but it's certainly up there.
Yeah, and so Lily straddles, which is not something that loose cannons do very often, but when they do, they usually get props from the poker players at the table. And she makes a flush, kind of like a baby flush, and Krosky overplays two pair. And to Nadia's horror, which I maybe is like giving her flashbacks, so maybe this was fun after Nikki Limo's game. They run it four times, but Lily was such a huge favorite that I'm actually kind of okay with running it four times. It's when you're like in a coin flip where that it makes less sense for the loose cannon to do that. I think it wasn't something I would do, but I don't think it was. I think it was okay ultimately, which that choice.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I would have never run it four times. It was like an 89% favorite to win. I would have just run it once. But also, again, Krosky had been making a big deal about running it 15 times the whole show. So, and they did like a little in the recap afterward. He's like, I'm so happy that Lily made my dream come true, and we ran it four times, which, okay, buddy, good for you. Um,
And since Lily was up a little bit after when that hand began, she ends up in $63,000 of profit after winning all four runs as a massive favorite against Krosky. So that was nice to see. And even though I don't really think that the post-mortem was memorable after that hand, at least we had a solid hand that, again, probably, again, one of the top three moments of Lily Newhouse's table's action, if you ask me, seeing
yeah,
that.
absolutely.
But other than that, the rest of the hands are, pretty minute, pretty unremarkable. I mean, Grafsky's involved in almost all of them, basically. And again, they're all pretty insubstantial after that, pretty big hand number 130. That'll be the number I'll remember, hand number 130 from this table. And the other like stray thoughts I had while I was watching was, again, we only had 10 hands in this episode, which is again pretty pitiful. Two of them are actually really good, though. That was the two Lily Kropsky hands. So I'll give them two very solid highlights out of 10 hands. The rest of the 10s are pretty meh at best. But then seeing Lily with her boyfriend, like she's literally like half the size of him. I thought that's kind of a funny juxtaposition.
Yeah, it was also just nice to see, her winning at the end and everybody applauding her, and it seems like she had a good time. So that, it's kind of a sweet note to end on.
Yeah. But it's again in this episode where we hear about her plan just to buy a pool with the money, which I'm like, even after taxes, you're gonna just waste it. Like, I want to be like, I want to give my child this, or I want to help my parents do that. I don't know, some sort of like, inspirational, like feel good purchase that, I had to pay off my mom had surgery, got to pay her bill. Just something that feels a bit more, happy-go-lucky energy.
What if it's a pool with a water slide?
I mean, I do love water slides, but even then, I feel like a water slide into a home pool, you don't see that
Yeah.
ever really.
Yeah, that'd be fun. What if she got like a little twisty water slide? That'd be
No, I
cool.
mean, there was the water slide in blank check. So I guess if she got that big a water slide, I mean, it was $1 million back then in 1994. So 20 years, 30 years later, wow, we're old. 30 years later, I don't know. So whenever I review 5 episodes of a TV show for the podcast, I usually have my individual episode notes. I'll do a final thought on the episode and then my final thoughts on that entire show in totality. And so I'll just raw read up my notes. So you tell me if you agree with me or not.
Sure.
Pretty surprising how little Phil Locke played.
Yep.
Postmortems, pretty lame overall.
Yep.
Ads for the auditions, lame.
Yep.
Lily's comeback's probably the biggest comeback in big game history.
Mhm.
Probably.
Yep.
Locke and Ho were ultimately a big letdown.
Yes.
And then Krofsky, pretty polarizing. I was pretty up on him in the first, maybe 2, 3 episodes, and then I just kind of soured on him towards the end. Those are kind of my little like bullet point thoughts. I don't know if you had any for your watching.
Yeah, I mean, nothing particular stands out. I mean, if I had to give like a number rating, I'd say like a 3 out of 5. I mean, I wasn't bored by this. I don't feel the need to go back to it. I again like the production design. I like the setup of it. I like that the interviews are sort of done in like a different room and it's sort of moody, sort of, atmospheric. I appreciate that Krosky tried to be entertaining, but again, I found Black more genuinely entertaining because it also felt like he was genuinely a little bit nervous. Like he never
Yes.
played big cash poker, so that was like a little bit more endearing to me than what Krosky was doing. And yeah, and again, Lily Newhouse seems like a totally nice person. Obviously, again, she's had a lot of success lately. Congrats to her. Congrats to her for finishing up. But yeah, I mean, I do hope that in the future they do turn to sort of the guy who walks in off the street and, three bet bluffs Phil Hellmuth off of pocket aces, more sort of that atmosphere than, a good semi-professional.
Yeah, and it's funny because had I not seen the Nikki Limo episodes first, I probably would have been slightly more generous on my critiques of this collection.
Hmm.
I probably, if Newhouse hadn't had that late comeback win, I probably would have knocked off a point of my grade. So I kind of gave, I guess, going by your scale, I would have given the Limo saga maybe like 3 out of 5, and then had Newhouse lost, maybe I would have been 2 out of 5. So I guess I can give it 3 out of 5 just because I felt happy for her, and it was good to see it all be for something rather than for nothing. It's that's the thing about these loose cannons that when they even though in Nikki's case she went out in episode 5. I mean, had she gone out in like episode 3, I mean, we had multiple episodes of a new six player, that would have been a whole different kind of program at that point. And so in this case, I guess I'll go 3 out of 5, I guess, but with an asterisk that if the third collection is just more of the same, it'll probably be a lower score. As I want to see the show improve table to table, and it's partially random if that's possible, but it's also partially on the editors and the production crew to spice things up for batch 3.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, part of this just has to do with the cards you get, and also just the vibe you're bringing, how you feel when you're on set. So I understand that when we say that Maria Ho and Philok are a disappointment, like we're not angry at them or anything. We understand like they just had an off night. They're usually pretty good. They're usually a lot of fun to have at a poker table. They just didn't quite come together. So
And,
you
and,
have
and,
to
and
kind of
even then, Ho still won $50,000, which is what she
right.
bought him for, basically. The final scores there, Lily won $55,800. Ho, she won 51.1 thousand. Michael Ian Black won 42,500. Locke was down almost 100 grand. Krosky was down 70 grand, and Grafton up 15K. So again, with 100, 200, it's a good number of big blinds, but it's also not life-changing money for anybody here.
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously taking into account that this is a luck-based game in our, in our reviews, and sometimes things just don't work out. But I do hope that in the future they take these critiques into account and just make a tighter show, more focused on poker, a little bit more energy in the room, just not too many interviews. And again, having more of that sort of dynamic of these other five players who want the loose cannon duo, but also want to make money. And so there's just sort of that interesting tension in there that I like.
Yeah, and so the only other thing I think I wanted to discuss with you, Sam, was sort of maybe this will be a recurring bit for us. It's sort of the what has come out on Pokergo since our last podcast.
Hmm.
And so really two things came out in the last couple of weeks. I'm sorry, guys, we've been on a fair hiatus, but it's kind of like end of summer, a lack of poker action more than anything else. So two things came out in Pokergo recently. One was the latest super high roller ball, which I was actually kind of intrigued by. Maybe like 5, 6 years ago it came out. I think
Hmm.
first one was like almost a decade ago, and there's now been a fair number. There's been annual installments of this tournament since then, and this is probably the most indifferent and bored I've ever been by this one. There were really besides Phil Ivey, there were really no players I cared about at all playing, and there was only 24 players in the event in the first place.
Yeah, and I didn't watch the whole thing, but I kind of just skipped through it and watched little clips of it. It had a very just sort of glum atmosphere. Like the setup for the feature table had this backdrop that was like had this weird sort of snowfall effect, which is kind of cool, but it makes the feature table feel very isolated and distant from the rest. There really wasn't any table talk. You had Martin Cabral, so obviously he brings a little bit of table talk there. Um, but beside him, there really just wasn't any banter amongst anybody. Everybody just felt sort of, not sad or depressed to be there, but just glum, just not really happy and exuding. So, and the commentary was just sort of, blah as well. There wasn't Jeff Platt wasn't in the field interviewing players. There wasn't sort of any like fun interview segments or anything. So it was just sort of like a very by the numbers blah event for me.
Yeah, and it just didn't have any sort of, there was no energy for me, and the players, I mean, it's okay if I don't have like my top 5 players in a tournament. I don't, that doesn't mean it can't be entertaining, but this is also for money that to these players is not really life-changing money. All these guys can easily afford it. I think, with the process of having a small field, one is there's less money up top for the, this massive first place prize. but it also means that we didn't have any like businessmen really in there. We didn't have any like satellite like amateur players in there. And with this also being a much smaller field than the heyday, I feel like you need to have at least like 40-ish players, 40 at least 40 players to make this event feel more sort of like legitimate, because we've also seen this with the big 1-for-1 drop where the field sizes just keep shrinking because there's so many more of these big buy-in events that players are less inclined to travel to go to, the sort of, off poker season events that are sort of these one-off, or in this case, I think it was a series of events actually, but I didn't follow any of the news of the other preliminary events at all. And so without the guys like Negreanu, I mean, you think at least giving Negreanu in there, he's usually a lock for these sort of buying events, but without those players in there, it just, again, I just didn't care. And it's split over like 3 days. And I think players could rebuy, but I'm not sure if anyone really did. I don't know. I didn't really follow it, to be honest. And it's just the most detached I've ever been for this event, which is a shame because I really enjoyed seeing Negreanu when he won it. That quads against Full House with Brent Kenny a couple years ago. Those events can have some big hands and big, momentous, moments. And I just didn't get that this time around.
Yeah, I mean the last 10 was kind of fun, straight over straight. It's always kind of fun to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, no real big moments stand out. I mean, as I mentioned, I like Martin Cabral. I understand a lot of people don't. I'm not getting into any allegations or anything involving him. I'm just saying his table presence, his banter is kind of fun. It was kind of funny seeing him banter with Phil Ivey because Ivey's very reticent and doesn't really give much away. But yeah, like even then he didn't really say anything of note. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to say about this one. I mean, it was just a very sort of glum, like probably the most glum poker event I've ever seen. Just kind of sad.
Yeah, I mean, with these, I really kind of the two big buying events I care about would be the big 1-for-1 drop and the high roller ball. With both of these trending down in the number of entrances, maybe it just might be time to have a break for a couple of years. Let sort of people have a hunger for these kind of events before you bring it back. That way, we can maybe get some more bigger fields in play for these events.
Yeah.
But I doubt that happened. And the other major content drop on Pokergo was this sort of like celebrity poker invitational thing. And they do these, I think, once or twice a year. And again, it's funny that they call us celebrity tournaments because the celebs here are pretty much all just like social media players, social media people, or like, YouTubers, Instagrammers, no one I really care about. Now, I recognized one or two names from maybe like years past, like I think Tara Mongo or something. I don't know. I remember seeing her in the some like cryptocurrency event like last year or something like that. So I was like, okay, I know that name, I guess. But I don't know. First of all, the blind structure is ridiculous. They have like 10 big blinds like an hour into the tournament. And these players, I don't know them. I don't care about them. I don't even know if like they don't really talk about the money that's being what this money means to them because these are all like social media influencers or whatever. So they have a fair steady income that doesn't require, like skilled labor or education or anything. So it's kind of hard to be like, oh, they won the event. This is like going to be life changing for them when I doubt it is. And so it's just another example of me being indifferent to a poker code content drop.
Yeah, I didn't see that, so I have no idea. But I hate celebrity reality shows because they're celebrity shows. It's like if you have somebody like Kato Kalin or like Tanya Harding, like these people who are famous for being famous or famous because of like something that happened 30 years ago, those aren't celebrities. Those are people who are just like clinging on to their little vestiges of fame as much as possible. But yeah, like having a poker event with just a bunch of YouTube influencers and Z-list YouTubers. It just doesn't make any sense to me. No, not trying to have a shot at anyone in particular here, but just like I just don't get something like that.
I mean, I know it's a bit loaded coming from two YouTubers that have a couple hundred subscribers, but
Yeah.
I mean, even with like the celebrity seasons of reality shows like Celebrity Mole, Celebrity Apprentice, etc., these are like D-list celebrities. But I'm talking about for this poker event, we have like these the J-list celebrities. Like these are not celebrities in Hollywood. They're just people. And maybe that once or twice it might have like an athlete in there, which is kind of strange. And so I guess maybe people from that region would know that athlete from their home team, I guess. But I don't know. I just feel like if you're gonna have a celebrity poker event for Poker Go, then have like actual celebrities. I'm not saying you can't get like Will Smith, A-list. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying get some fairly cool like noteworthy people that like someone from like if you went to like the box office top 10 list, give me some actors from those movies. I don't know. Maybe I'd care a little bit at that point.
Yeah, I mean I know that some casinos have had sort of live streams with celebrities and like Phil Hellmuth, and they kind of banter at each other. Like those are okay every now and again, but events like this just don't really need to exist. I mean, obviously, like Ben Affleck and Matt Damon and the rest were playing poker back in the day. Like maybe, give them a sponsorship and have them come in. Like you can make it a charity thing even that would encourage more sort of higher profile celebrities to show up. If you're just going to get these Stephen Baldwin types, just don't bother.
And so I guess it's only fair if we're going to discuss the last couple of Pokergo drops. I'm looking at the Pokergo schedule for September, and we have the Poker Masters 2024. I can't believe it's already time for those. And herein lies the real problem with this schedule is that each event I'm seeing one, two, three, four, five, I think 8 events. Each one is no limit hold'em. We have 5K
Oh,
hold'em, 10K hold'em, 10K hold'em, 10K hold'em, 15K hold'em, 50K hold'em, and 25K hold'em. So I mean, these are just not unique events in any way. Each maybe the one's a hyper, one's a turbo. I don't know, but the buy-in is pretty much the same. The game is pretty much the same. The players playing it will be pretty much the same. The file of tables will probably be pretty much the same. I mean, I just don't see how that is really entertaining or worthwhile.
yeah, I mean the Masters obviously is a big golf tournament. If you win the Masters and you're in golf, you're going into the Hall of Fame, of golf. Poker Masters should be, a little bit more prestigious. I'm not saying it has to be as big as the WSOP with 100 different events, and there's all sorts of different rare stuff as well as, combinations of different things. But yeah, like why not have a horse tournament at the Masters? Why not have a PLO tournament? Why not have a Raz tournament? Add a little bit more diversity in there. And then the person who wins, the Masters overall is, this great person of poker who's mastered all these different disciplines, right? And it's a little bit more prestigious and a little bit more important than just, banking a couple no limit hold'em tournaments. I mean, I'll skim through probably a couple of these events. If there's any big names, I might check them out. If the final tables are exciting, I might check them out. But I don't really see, even amongst the audience who are on Pokergo, how this is going to draw people in. And if you're talking about bringing people into the game, I fail to see how the Poker Masters is really going to bring people into the game and get people interested in poker.
Yeah, it just kind of feels more like we need to have content for Poker Go for our current subscribers. So we just got to invent some stuff and have it played out. But even then, I just feel like that's not an excuse for a streaming service to exist, just to have that. I mean, I know that yes, we had the Rosa Poker that's in the now in the back burner, and that's not until next year and whatnot. But I don't know. It doesn't get me excited anyway, unless Helmut and Negrano make it. And if they got to first play in it too, that's not even a matter of. I mean, if DNAG didn't even play in the high roller ball, then what are his odds of actually playing on this? We don't know.
Yeah, I mean, looking ahead to October, I mean, the PGT has a whole PLO series. And even here, there's quite a bit of diversity. There's Pot Limit Omaha, there's Pot Limit Omaha Progressive Bounty, there's a 5K PLO, there's 10K PLO, 15K PLO with Progressive Bounty. Obviously, there's a little bit more diversity there, and that it's a series of tournaments that are PLO, and there's going to be another series that's a different game, and so on. Do something like that if you're going to do the Masters, right? I'm okay with a bunch of no limit hold'em events if it's in a series, and then there's other series that are of different games. I think they should emulate that moving forward.
Yeah. And besides that, we're still waiting to hear about the public dropping of the Mike Madisau documentary. We're still very excited to watch that. Again, there's that 1 in 10 billion chance that myself, Adam, and his brother are somehow in some part of that movie. Unlikely, but you never know. And besides that, though, it's just not a whole lot in the poker world that is getting me excited for the end of this year. I know, obviously, that can dip and wane as far as what comes out, but hopefully something else will surprise us.
Yeah, I mean, this Madison documentary, I mean, who knows how it's going to be? I mean, obviously they have a lot of footage of him. Hopefully it's not just, making fun of him or whatever, get to learn a little bit about his life and his personality instead of just him, shirtless or whatever he was in the trailer. And yeah, it would be nice if you're in it. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that you're in it. So fingers crossed, and we'll obviously keep updated. And if you have any suggestions for content you want us to review, it can be a poker show, it can be a poker movie, what have you, drop it in the description below. It doesn't have to be, poker doesn't have to be the absolute center of it. It can be a little bit more generalized, if you will. Just let us know what you want to review, and we'll try to take a watch of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of covers our little itinerary today. Hope you guys enjoyed listening to our opinions here. And again, I'm optimistic that maybe maybe in season 4 of the Big Game on Tour that they'll maybe cut down on the filler bullshit and give us a bit more concentrated poker action. But I wouldn't hold my breath on that.
Yeah, and also if you are interested in being interviewed on the podcast, do let us know. We are more than happy to interview you. We are trying to, we have a couple people behind the scenes we're talking to. Hopefully, we'll get somebody soon. Fingers crossed.
Exactly, guys. Until next time, enjoy your poker, enjoy your TV, and enjoy your poker on TV.
Don't run it 4 times. Bye bye.
Bye.